The dust-laden wind carried the acrid scent of gunpowder and blood as Eliza Rowland stumbled through the remains of her family's homestead, the still smoldering embers of what was once her home crackling beneath her feet. Colorado Territory, 1875, a place where dreams went to die and nightmares came to life. Her father's body lay cold beside the water pump, her mother's inside what was left of their modest cabin. The raiders hadn't even bothered to bury them. Eliza clutched the small bundle of belongings she'd managed to salvage: a photograph, a silver hairpin, and her father's pocket watch, the meager remnants of her 22 years of life. Her dark hair whipped around her face as she surveyed the destruction one final time, tears streaking clean lines down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "There's nothing left for me here," she whispered, her voice lost to the howling prairie wind. She'd heard rumors of a small town called Redemption about 30 miles west. With no horse and only a canteen of water, she began walking, each step carrying her away from everything she'd ever known. The brutal June sun beat down relentlessly. By midday, Eliza's throat was parched, her feet blistered inside her worn boots. The vast open prairie stretched endlessly before her, beautiful and terrifying in its isolation. After hours of walking, the distant sound of hoofbeats broke the monotony. Instinctively, Eliza dropped to the ground, heart hammering against her ribs. The raiders might have returned. She held her breath as a lone figure on horseback approached, a dark silhouette against the setting sun. "Madam? You all right down there?" a deep voice called out. Eliza squinted up at the figure, a tall man atop a chestnut stallion. He wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy, not the black attire of the men who'd attacked her home. I'm fine," she managed, her voice barely audible. The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 26 or 27. His features were weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes held a kindness that made Eliza's guard lower slightly. "Weston Ward," he introduced himself, tipping his hat. "Don't often find ladies taking a rest in the middle of nowhere." "Eliza Rowland," she replied, hesitantly accepting his outstretched hand to help her up. "I'm headed to Redemption." Weston's expression shifted. "That's a fair piece on foot. Where'd you come from?" Eliza's eyes dropped to the ground. "Eastbrook Homestead. Raiders came through last night." Understanding darkened his features. "Your folks?" She shook her head, unable to form the words. Weston surveyed the horizon, then looked back at Eliza's exhausted form. "My ranch is about 5 miles from here. You're welcome to rest there tonight. Get a proper meal. I can take you to Redemption tomorrow if that's still where you want to go." Eliza hesitated. Her father had always warned her about the dangers of trusting strangers, but her options were limited. Continue walking and likely collapse from exhaustion or accept help from this cowboy who, despite his rugged appearance, hadn't given her reason to fear him. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "No burden," Weston replied, leading his horse closer. "What kind of man would I be if I left you out here? The prairie's no place for anyone alone after dark." With reluctance born of necessity, Eliza allowed him to help her onto his horse. She sat behind him, awkwardly placing her hands on his shoulders. "You'll want to hold tighter than that," he advised as the horse began to move. "Rusty here has a bit of a bounce to his trot." As they rode, Weston kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling her about his small cattle ranch, his 2 ranch hands, and how he'd come to Colorado Territory 5 years ago from Missouri. His voice was steady and calming, a welcome distraction from the grief threatening to overwhelm her. The Ward Ranch came into view just as dusk settled across the land, a modest but well-maintained cabin with a barn and corral. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth and perhaps food. 2 dogs came bounding out to greet them, followed by an older man with a silver beard. "Found a traveler, Earl," Weston called as he helped Eliza dismount. Her legs nearly gave way beneath her after the long ride. Earl nodded respectfully. Madame, supper's almost ready if you're hungry. Inside the cabin, Eliza was introduced to Miguel, the younger ranch hand. The interior was simple but clean, with a wooden table, several chairs, a small kitchen area, and doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. You can take my room tonight, Weston said, gesturing to one of the doors. I'll bunk with Earl. I couldn't possibly, Eliza began to protest. We insist, Earl interrupted, placing a bowl of stew in front of her. Been a while since we've had a lady's company. Reminds us to mind our manners. The stew was hearty and flavorful, warming Eliza from the inside. As she ate, she felt the weight of the day's events pressing down. When tears began to fall silently into her bowl, none of the men commented, affording her the dignity of private grief. Later, alone in Weston's room, Eliza examined her surroundings: a simple bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser with a mirror, and a bookshelf filled with more volumes than she would have expected. Titles by Dickens, Twain, and Cooper lined the shelves, alongside practical manuals on ranching and horse care. Sleep came in fitful bursts, nightmares jolting her awake throughout the night. By dawn, she had made a decision. She would thank Weston for his hospitality and continue to redemption. Perhaps there she could find work as a seamstress or housekeeper, anything to build a new life from the ashes of the old. When she emerged from the bedroom, however, she found the cabin empty except for Weston, who was frying bacon at the stove. Good morning, he greeted her. Hope you managed some rest. Coffee? Eliza accepted the steaming mug gratefully. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Ward. I'll be on my way to redemption after breakfast, if you could point me in the right direction. Weston turned from the stove, his expression serious. About that. There's something you should know about redemption. A knot formed in Eliza's stomach. What do you mean? Towns changed this past year. The silver mine brought in all sorts, including the kind of men you'd want to avoid. Especially a woman on her own. He placed a plate of bacon and eggs before her. What were you planning to do there? Find work. I can sew, cook, clean. Her voice trailed off as she realized how unprepared she truly was. Weston sat across from her. Miss Rowland, I don't mean to overstep, but I could use help around here. The cooking's terrible, as you might have noticed, and the place could use a woman's touch. It would just be until you decide what you want to do next. Paid work, of course. Eliza studied him, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she considered his offer. It would be temporary, a chance to earn money and plan her next move. I have no references, she said finally. A smile tugged at the corner of Weston's mouth. Don't need them. Earl says you've got honest eyes, and that's good enough for me. And so Eliza Rowland found herself staying at the Ward Ranch, initially just for a few days, which stretched into weeks. She took over the cooking and household duties, grateful for the purpose it gave her days. The men were respectful, though Miguel often flashed charming smiles her way that she politely ignored. Weston kept a courteous distance, treating her with a deference that bordered on shyness. But Eliza often caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, not with the predatory gaze she'd come to fear from some men, but with a quiet curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. July faded into August, bringing scorching days and the occasional violent thunderstorm. One such evening, as lightning cracked across the sky and rain pounded the roof, Eliza found herself alone with Weston in the cabin, Earl and Miguel having gone to town for supplies before the storm hit. They'll likely stay in town tonight, Weston said, adding wood to the fire. Road gets treacherous in this weather. Eliza nodded, focusing on her mending. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the howling wind and the crackle of the fire. You never talk about them, Weston said suddenly. Your family. Eliza's hands stilled. It's difficult. I understand. He settled into the chair opposite her. Lost my parents in a cholera outbreak when I was 18. My sister followed a few months later. The admission surprised her. In all their time together, Weston had rarely spoken of his past. I'm sorry. It gets easier, though it never goes away completely. His eyes met hers. Sometimes talking helps, though. Perhaps it was the storm, creating a world where only they existed, or perhaps it was the genuine concern in his voice. But Eliza found herself speaking of her parents, her father's dreams of building a prosperous farm, her mother's garden that bloomed against all odds in the harsh prairie soil. They were good people, she finished, surprised to find that talking about them had indeed eased something inside her. They deserved better than what happened. As did you, Weston said quietly. Their eyes met across the room, and something shifted in the air between them. Before either could speak further, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, breaking the moment. I should check on the animals, Weston said, rising to his feet. Make sure the barn door is secure. Alone, Eliza pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her quickened heartbeat. She'd come to respect Weston's quiet strength and integrity, his kindness not just to her, but to his men and animals. But the feeling stirring inside her now was something different, something that both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning dawned clear and fresh, the storm having washed the world clean. Earl and Miguel returned with supplies and news from town, including rumors of the same raiders who had attacked Eliza's homestead, striking again further south. Marshall's putting together a posse, Earl reported as they unloaded the wagon. Says they're moving north, hitting isolated places. Weston's jaw tightened. We'll need to keep watch. Take turns on patrol. That evening, Weston surprised Eliza by asking her to teach him to read better. I can manage simple things, he explained, but those novels on my shelf? Most were my sister's. I've been trying to improve. Their lessons became a nightly ritual, heads bent together over dog-eared copies of Dickens as Weston struggled with the more complicated passages. Eliza discovered he was a quick learner, his difficulty stemming more from lack of practice than inability. My pa didn't hold with book learning, he admitted one night. Said it was a waste of time for a boy meant to work with his hands. My sister taught me in secret. Eliza found her admiration for him growing with each revelation. Despite his lack of formal education, Weston possessed a natural intelligence and curiosity about the world that many schooled men lacked. September brought cooler temperatures and the annual cattle drive to sell the season's calves. Weston would be gone for nearly 2 weeks, leaving Earl in charge of the ranch. The night before his departure, Weston found Eliza on the porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, leaning against the railing beside her. It is, she agreed. I've come to love this view. Weston turned to face her, his expression earnest. I hope you'll still be here when I get back. The statement caught her off guard. Where else would I go? Redemption. Some other town. You've saved some money now. Enough to start fresh somewhere. Eliza studied his face, noting the tension around his eyes. Are you asking me to leave, Mr. Ward? No, he said quickly. The opposite, in fact. I've grown accustomed to your presence here. More than accustomed. He cleared his throat. What I'm trying to say, poorly, is that I hope you found something worth staying for. Heart racing, Eliza took a small step toward him. Perhaps I have. The distance between them seemed to shrink, though neither had moved further. The moment stretched, fraught with possibility, until the sound of Earl calling Weston's name broke the spell. Think about it, Weston said softly, before turning to answer Earl's summons. With Weston gone, the ranch felt different. Eliza threw herself into her work, cleaning the cabin from top to bottom and mending every piece of clothing she could find. but her thoughts continually drifted to their conversation on the porch and what might have happened if they hadn't been interrupted. 10 days into Weston's absence, disaster struck. Eliza was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching, not the steady rhythm of a single rider, but the thunderous sound of multiple horses at full gallop. Her blood ran cold as 6 riders appeared, their faces obscured by bandanas, guns drawn. Earl emerged from the barn, shotgun in hand, but he never had a chance to use it. The lead rider shot him without hesitation, sending the old man crumpling to the ground. Eliza screamed, dropping the laundry and running toward the cabin where she knew Miguel kept a pistol. She'd barely reached the porch when rough hands seized her, dragging her back. "Look what we found, boys," a harsh voice said, spinning her around to face the leader. "Seems Ward's got himself a woman." Terror gripped Eliza as she recognized the voice, one of the men who had murdered her parents. They hadn't been random raiders. They'd been systematically targeting homesteads and small ranches, stealing valuables and livestock. "Please," she begged, though she knew from experience these men had no mercy. "Take whatever you want." "Oh, we intend to," the leader said, his eyes cold above his bandana. "Starting with you." A gunshot rang out, making the leader jerk back in surprise. Miguel stood in the doorway of the cabin, pistol raised. "Let her go," he demanded. What followed was chaos. Miguel managed to wound 2 of the raiders before they shot him down. In the confusion, Eliza broke free, running toward the barn where she knew a rifle was kept. She'd just reached it when pain exploded in her shoulder, the impact of a bullet spinning her to the ground. Through a haze of agony, she saw the raiders ransacking the cabin, loading valuables into saddlebags. 2 of them started toward the barn toward her. Suddenly, the thunder of hooves approached from the south. The raiders turned, alert to the new threat. Around the bend came Weston, followed by 3 other men, his fellow ranchers returning from the cattle drive. Seeing the situation, Weston and his companions drew their weapons. What followed was a brutal gunfight that left 2 raiders dead and the rest fleeing north. Eliza, drifting in and out of consciousness, was vaguely aware of being lifted, of Weston's voice tight with fear as he called her name. Then darkness claimed her. She awoke in an unfamiliar room, the scent of antiseptic sharp in her nostrils. A gray-haired man with spectacles was leaning over her. "Welcome back, Miss Rowland," he said kindly. "I'm Dr. Thompson. You're in my clinic in Redemption." Eliza tried to sit up, gasping as pain shot through her shoulder. "Weston? Earl? Miguel?" The doctor's face grew somber. "Mr. Ward is fine. He's barely left your side these 3 days. I finally sent him to get some rest. As for the others..." He shook his head. "I'm sorry. They didn't make it." Grief washed over Eliza, fresh and raw. Earl with his gruff kindness and Miguel with his charming smile, both gone because of men who seemed to bring only death. "The raiders?" she asked. "The marshal caught up with them yesterday. None survived the encounter." Dr. Thompson patted her hand. "It's over now." But it didn't feel over. It felt like an ending without closure, a story with the final pages torn out. Eliza closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Later that day, Weston appeared, his face haggard with exhaustion and grief. When he saw Eliza awake, something like hope flickered in his eyes. "You're all right," he breathed, taking the chair beside her bed. "I thought, when I saw you lying there..." "Earl and Miguel," Eliza said, her voice breaking. "The doctor told me." Weston nodded, his own grief evident. "We buried them on the hill behind the ranch, where they can see the sunrise." His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he reached for hers. "I should never have left you there." "You couldn't have known," Eliza said. "None of us could." They sat in silence for a moment, united in mourning. Then Weston spoke, his voice low and determined. "I want you to know that you'll be taken care of. The ranch is yours if you want it. Or I can arrange for you to go somewhere else. Denver, perhaps. Somewhere safer. Eliza studied him, seeing the guilt and pain etched into his features. And what about you? Where will you go? I haven't decided. Can't stay at the ranch. Not after. He trailed off, unable to finish. Understanding dawned on Eliza. You blame yourself. For Earl and Miguel. For me. Weston couldn't meet her eyes. If I had been there, then you might be dead too, Eliza interrupted. And where would that leave me? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Slowly, Weston raised his gaze to meet hers. What are you saying, Eliza? Her heart pounding, Eliza gathered her courage. I'm saying that I don't want to go to Denver or anywhere else, not without you. She took a shaky breath. Before you left, you asked if I'd found something worth staying for. I have, Weston. I found you. The look that crossed his face was one of disbelief mingled with hope. After everything that's happened, you still want to stay? The raiders took my family, my home. I won't let them take my future, too. Her voice strengthened with conviction. We can rebuild the ranch together, make it a place of life again, not death. Weston's hand tightened around hers. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is, she replied. October brought healing for Eliza's shoulder, for their grief, for the land itself as autumn painted the prairie in russet and gold. They returned to the ranch after 3 weeks in town, finding it silent and empty, yet full of possibility. Together they cleaned away the signs of violence, repaired damaged furniture, and planted wildflowers where Earl and Miguel lay. Neighboring ranchers helped repair the barn and offered livestock to replace what had been stolen. Slowly, the ranch came back to life. They hired 2 new Hands brothers named Thomas and James, who had worked with Weston on cattle drives before. The routine of ranch life resumed, though now with a different rhythm. Each evening, Weston and Eliza would sit on the porch, watching the sunset. Sometimes they talked about the future expanding the herd, adding on to the cabin, perhaps planting an orchard like the one Eliza's mother had always dreamed of. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, content in each other's presence. It was on such an evening, with the first frost of the season crystallizing on the prairie grass, that Weston took Eliza's hand in his. I've been thinking, he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. A dangerous pastime, she teased gently. He smiled, some of his nervousness easing. I've been thinking about us, about what you mean to me. Eliza's heart quickened. And what have you concluded, Mr. Ward? That I love you, he said simply, that I want to build a life with you. Not as my housekeeper or my partner in this ranch, but as my wife. Joy bloomed in Eliza's chest, bright and warm against the chill evening air. I love you too, Weston. I think I have since that first day when you found me on the prairie. He cupped her face gently, his calloused palm rough against her cheek. May I kiss you, Eliza Rowland? In answer, she leaned forward, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepening as they each poured months of unspoken longing into it. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Weston pressed his forehead to hers. Is that a yes, then? Yes, Eliza laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. 1,000 times, yes. They were married on the first day of November, a small ceremony in the Redemption Church with the neighboring ranchers and townspeople in attendance. Eliza wore a blue dress that Mrs. Thompson, the doctor's wife, had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. That night, as husband and wife, they stood on the porch of their home, looking out at the land that had seen so much sorrow and was now witnessing their joy. What are you thinking? Weston asked, his arm around her waist. Eliza leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. I was thinking about the day we met, how lost I was. how I had nowhere to go. Weston pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. And now? Now I'm home, she said simply. With you. As winter settled over the Colorado Territory, the Ward Ranch stood warm and bright against the darkening landscape. Inside, Eliza and Weston built the foundation of their life together, finding in each other the healing they both needed, the strength to face whatever challenges the frontier might bring. And on cold nights, when memories of loss threatened to overwhelm her, Eliza would remember Weston's words from that fateful day on the prairie, a promise kept, a future secured in the circle of his arms. 5 years later, the Ward Ranch had flourished beyond their wildest dreams. The herd had tripled in size, the cabin had been expanded to a proper house with a wraparound porch, and an orchard of young apple trees stood where once there had been only prairie grass. But the greatest joy of all ran on stubby legs across the yard, their 3-year-old son Robert, named for Eliza's father, and 1-year-old daughter Margaret, named for Weston's sister. The ranch that had once known only grief now rang with children's laughter. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Weston took Eliza riding to the spot where he'd found her all those years ago. They picnicked under the vast Colorado sky, watching their children play among the wild flowers. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Eliza asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "If you hadn't come along that day?" Weston's arm tightened around her. "I prefer to think about how things did turn out." He kissed her softly. How a lost woman and a lonely cowboy found everything they needed in each other. Eliza smiled, watching their children chase butterflies through the tall grass. From tragedy had come joy. From loss had come fullness. From two broken souls had come a family bound by love and resilience. "I have no regrets," she said, turning to meet her husband's gaze. "Every step that led me to you was worth taking, even the painful ones." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the prairie in gold just as it had on that first evening, Weston helped Eliza to her feet. Together they gathered their children, mounted their horses, and rode home not to a place, but to each other, to the life they had built from ashes and hope. And in the whisper of the prairie wind, in the strength of their entwined hands, echoed the promise that had started it all. That sometimes the greatest journeys begin when we have nowhere else to go, and sometimes the safest harbor is found not in a place, but in the arms of someone who loves us.